The following video aims at analyzing and explaining the process involved in our first experience as teachers in the Access program. Hopefully, this analysis will help us to become aware of the different variables that influence on the success of the class, as well as the strengths and weaknesses present in every stage of the lesson. We focused on task-based instruction, which according to Miller, Hartman, and Schocker-Fon 2007 is perform meaningful tasks in the real world. Our video is divided in 5 parts. The first 3 correspond to the ESA method coined by Hartman in 2001 that we used in our lesson, considering the weaknesses of each part as well as the strengths. After that, we will discuss about which were the most successful and the weakest parts of the class. Finally, the last part is dedicated to our conclusions and visions about our experience.
The engaging section consisted of 2 parts. In the first one, students were presented with a weather forecast video. In the second one, we reinforced the language of prediction and the language of weather. Finally, we presented the objectives. The main strengths of this section were instructions. As stated by Scrivener 2005, giving clear instructions is of paramount importance in the developing of the class. Thus, we gave students instructions by chunks rather than all of them together. This allowed students to fully understand the different steps of the stage.
A group of 4 and another group of 5, okay? Okay, perfect. So, you have to choose a name for your TV show. For example, Access Weather. Very creative. The country and city will be assigned. Here we have the country and the city. And you have to predict the weather conditions for the next 6 hours, for the next week, and for the next month. Okay?
Another point worth mentioning are the comprehension checks we use to see if students have fully understood the instructions of the task.
The idea is that each one of you predicts one city for the next 6 hours, for the next 6 days, and for the next month.
Okay, so how many groups? How many groups? 2.
Another strength was in relation to the materials. The video shown was short enough to keep students' attention, but informative enough to present the task. Once we entered the classroom, we noticed that some students were unmotivated and tired from previous lessons. Thus, we used Brown's principle of language ego throughout this whole section as to promote the participation. Thus, expressions such as good job or well done were used. We also recurred to the eye contact, which according to Scrivener catches the student's attention. We also used the technique of TPR to explain the concept of present, future, and past, and the nut scam technique of the sandwich when explaining the concept of weather forecast.
When someone predicts about future weather, right? Okay, so what was the lady doing? What was she talking about? Okay, you say the weather conditions, right? But was she talking about the weather conditions of today, or was she talking about the future or the past? The future, right? She was talking about it's going to be rain, it's going to be wind, it's going to come a storm. So what was the lady doing?
Overall, this section worked very nicely. Students were engaged, understood all the instructions, and related previous knowledge with the new knowledge. Besides, they fully understood the task. There was only one weakness related to the amount of time spent on the activity. It was designed for about only 5 minutes, but it ended up lasting close to 10.
In the study part, we started with a modeling idea in which we gave them clear examples of the activity we wanted them to develop. As Scrivener 2005 claims, we as teachers have to become aware of your own instruction giving. So to get students' attention, we gave them a clear modeling activity with music and acting.
Netherlands. Anyone knows which country is that? Holanda, exactly. Well, for Amsterdam, for the next 6 hours, we will have sunny conditions, and for the next
After that, we asked if the instructions were clear and if they understood what they had to do. This was one of the biggest strengths of the study section, since the instructions were clear enough so they had no doubts about what they were supposed to do. As Larsen, Friedman, and Anderson 2011 mentions, cooperative learning is a method in which students interact and learn from each other in order to learn more effectively. We relied on this method since we proposed a group activity in which they had to interact and help each other in order to produce their own weather forecasts, and, as we said as a rule, all of them had to participate in the production and presentation of the final product.
The last section, activation, students had to prepare and present their own weather forecast. Students worked in groups and presented also in groups. In this section, we found many strengths. The first one is in relation to the materials. Sheets of paper with grammar enhancement were given to the students, highlighting the structures that were supposed to be present in the weather forecast. This facilitated the activity, especially for those students with a lower level of English. Another strength was the cooperative learning during this section. According to Larsen, Friedman, and Anderson 2011, the role of the teacher is to organize the groups and provide with materials while students support each other in order to learn. We clearly noticed this since all students supported each other, answered to each other's questions, and gave each other's ideas. This led to an excellent group activity where everyone supported each other. This section was overall successful. Students worked cooperatively, worked with each other, and presented excellent weather forecast with the correct use of the language of predictions. A weakness in this section was also related to cooperative learning. It was the fact that we didn't assign the groups. We later noticed that the students with the best level of English grouped among themselves, leaving those with a lower level of English outside the group. This could have been improved by mixing both levels of English so as to promote even more cooperative learning. Unfortunately, the video does not show up when students handed in the peer evaluation. In this section, we asked students from Group 1 to evaluate the work of Group 2 and Group 2 to evaluate the work of Group 1. This section was also done perfectly, and both groups were extremely honest in their responses.
Which one is your city?
The strengths presented overall in the class were clear enough instructions. The class participation and what Scrivener calls active monitoring and participative monitoring, where we not only responded to the students' help, but also engaged conversation and gave suggestions. This was successful mostly because we allowed the students to ask and resolve doubts, but also because our dispositions was always helpful and close.
The overall weakness of the class was that we underestimated the time per activity, leaving the wrap-up activity not as clear as we would have liked to. A solution for this is to create a plan B whenever we feel the time is running out. Another general conclusion we can draw from this are the roles of the teacher and the student. We based our class on the principle of student autonomy. Thus, the role of the teacher was to set the environment, the materials, and the input, and the production was part of the student's responsibility. This has made us realize the true effects of a student-centered class, where students are the main focus of the lesson. This has proven that a student-focused class it is possible and it is.
Javier did a wonderful job on the engaging part. He certainly manages how to be engaging, has an excellent control of his voice, and gave a great contextualization of the topic of the class. As a critic, maybe he has to become more aware of timing and also be more cautious when it comes to his monitoring attitude and not forget his role as a teacher.
Rodrigo was an excellent partner. He is great at giving instructions and getting students to understand the activity and the steps necessary to achieve a product. He is also very clear and straight to the point, which comes in handy when explaining concepts or doubts. But for future occasion, he should work on being a bit more involved with the monitoring part. Maybe asking if the students need more help could help to develop a better monitoring.
From my point of view, this was a great experience, not only because I had the opportunity to teach a real lesson for the first time, but also because each of these experiences through this course and during the time I've been studying to become a teacher of English have given me the convincement that this is what I want to do with my life. As a future teacher, I have to say that these experiences are extremely positive since it's one great opportunity to put in practice what we learn and also to test ourselves in real class environments. Most of all, this is a great chance to see if the theories and models we study are really useful when it comes to teaching. Finally, I have to say that it is great to see that we are able to plan a lesson and that it works, that you can actually teach what you planned, and that your students will learn from you.
As a final conclusion and a personal conclusion, I can say that this experience has re-triggered a passion within me. I have always loved to be a teacher, and feeling like a teacher, like a real teacher, has re-triggered that passion for education. But it has also made me aware of the many aspects that come to play when teaching. There are many theoretical, There are many aspects related to your students, to your preparation, and those need to be taken in consideration. Also, this was extremely helpful because our it moved us from theory to practice. So far, we have always analyzed theory and seen macro strategies and principles, but never put them in practice. This was one of the first instances where I really felt like a teacher. Also, the fact that you have to analyze and see yourself is extremely helpful because you can notice the mistakes right away. Also, analyzing has made this process complete. From reading the theory to creating a class in your mind to actually teaching and to see yourself and analyzing has closed a circle. Overall, I'm extremely satisfied with the experience and I feel really prepared for my next practicums.
And over the next couple of days, we are going to continue to have those ranked.